For the mask project, you can use anything in the box that came to you, the adornment kit that came out to you. You can use your hot glue gun, you can use tape, the glue stick works very well. You can sew things together. Feel free to incorporate other materials. Doesn't have to be all just the paper. You can bring in some fabric, you can bring in colorful paper. The interesting thing about this paper is it's very monochromatic. You start adding tape in there, it's going to change the color a little bit. If you have Scotch tape and you want to keep it very pristine and white, that might be the way to do it without incorporating this additional tape color. But that's up to you. You can incorporate color as much or as little as you want to. But one of the things that I think would be most useful for you is the kind of cardstock index card type paper. It will be a nice platform for you to kind of add to, the mask. And there's a couple of things that you can do to help shape and create some more voluminous kind of shapes for your project. In the metalsmithing world, we use a technique called scoring to take flat material and we score the metal, and that helps us to bend it and shape it into something a little more interesting. This spoon here, this little shovel-looking utensil, is something that I made, and I use this technique, and you can see this piece of metal here. This is a piece of copper. It has been scored on the inside, right down here in this very shallow curve. And that allowed me to bend the metal into sort of a shallow dish, I guess. But I can bend it in two different directions. I could bend it this way, and then I can also bend it this way. So you can kind of see right there where the crease is. That's where it has been creased and scored and bent into this little sort of shovel shape. Okay, so this started out as a flat piece of metal. Metal is much more malleable than paper. This, believe it or not, started out as a flat piece of metal as well. In the metalsmithing world, we can use hammers and we can stretch the metal to make very dynamic shapes. And paper doesn't quite do that because it doesn't stretch the way that metal does. We can also do dish kind of shapes. We can make bowl shapes out of metal because it stretches a little bit more. This is a flat piece of brass that I started hammering on, and you can see how it's changing its shape just by hammering. And with a ball peen hammer, we can create these sort of dish-like shapes. Very extreme example. I like to make utensils. That's part of the fabrication class. And this ladle started out as a flat piece of copper. And so just by hammering on it, we can change its shape. Again, we can't really do that with paper, but we can certainly score the paper to create dynamic shapes. This is a ring, actually, again, made of copper, and there's a silver band. It's actually a 2-finger ring. Doesn't quite fit me. But this top piece is the piece that I want you to focus on because it has been scored here and here, but we scored on the inside. And that allows me to fold this portion down, and it'll have a concave bend in it, while the top has a convex bend. And then this side over here as well has this concave indentation in both sides. So it creates, a much more interesting three-dimensional shape than if it was just a flat piece of metal on top. So this is what I'm kind of getting at, is showing you how to take two-dimensional paper and create three-dimensional forms from it. In your kit, you should have all gotten a bone folder. There's two different versions. There's this version, and then there was one that was more straight with sort of a rounded point on it. They're the same. They work the same. What you do with the bone folder, it helps to put very precise score marks into the paper. And I'm going to tip this down so you can see what I'm doing here. This is my piece of paper. I've just got a little square of of the index cardstock, and with a ruler I can make very straight lines just by pressing down on the paper. I could maybe do this both directions here, going corner to corner. And it may be a little bit tough to see, but I've got these score marks in the paper, and it allows me then to bend or fold the paper very precisely. So I've got a very nice crease in the paper. And I can go and do the other side, the other direction as well. Okay, so I've got these very precise creases in the paper now. And I can open this back up a little bit, and then you can start to play with more dynamic shapes. This is nothing probably new to any of you. I'm sure you've all played around with origami at some point to create these, much more interesting dynamic shapes, right? So in convex curves on the insides of all of these individual triangles, creases on the top. What you do with this, I don't know. It's totally up to you. I took one of these though, and in order to help hold its shape, I took the needle and thread and I just stitched back and forth to help hold the shape together. So that's maybe something interesting you could do. The needle and thread are there for you to use in any of the projects. I threw it in just thinking that, at some point you may need to do a little bit of sewing. The needle is quite large for this project. It's a rather large bookbinding needle, so it's going to leave a pretty decent sized hole, but that's no big deal. This thread is not, you don't have to use this thread. If you have some thread of your own, you can certainly use something else. It's completely up to you. But that's one way to hold these shapes in place if you're interested in that. This piece here was basically just a flat rectangle of material, of paper, that I scored these sort of long curved shapes into, going both directions here. Let me just try to do that real quick. This was just done free form. I just held the bone folder and just scored in, a subtle curve there, and I did it 2 times. When doing this freehand, you only get one shot at it. You can't really go over it again because you're probably going to go off your line a little bit. But having those creases in there, I don't know if you can see it, if the reflection or the light's picking up on it, that will allow you to then manipulate the paper to create, more dynamic 3-dimensional form. So with your masks, you can create these little shapes and, figure out ways to use this method for creating volume in your mask. Okay, I've got one crease done with that, nice curve to it. Now I can do the other one as well. You got to be gentle and you got to be sort of careful with this. But it works quite well. So now I've got this, I don't know, it's sort of a boat-like shape in a way, very similar to some of those shapes that I use frequently in my jewelry work. But you can see how we've got a much more dynamic shape. Again, what you do with these things is kind of up to you. You'll want to play around with this and just see what kind of shapes you can get. To do this, basically what I did is I cut, just right across here, flipped it over, cut right across here. I'll do it with this piece. Like that, right up to the scored portion. And I'll do it again right here. And then that allowed me to then bend it again to create an even more dynamic shape. And with the glue stick, I could add a little bit of glue right here. Kind of feel like we're going back to elementary school just a little bit, but it works. And then I can overlap these and just very quickly, you can hold this down, give it a little bit of pressure, and the glue will hold the piece in position. So, very quickly, I've got, a much more dynamic shape. So play around with this, play around with the paper, see what kind of shapes you can get. This is going to take time. You're going to need to, have some successes, some false starts, some things that work well, some things that don't work very well. But play around with it, and then you're going to start to build this mask shape. And like I said, you can do the entire thing out of the index card paper if you want to. You can incorporate other elements into the piece. This was just another one of my first attempts at building a three-dimensional, semi-enclosed shape. A couple of curvy kind of score lines here and here, here and here, and then I brought it all together by gluing it down here on the bottom. So again, this is all about play, and then you'll start to figure out how to manipulate the material a little bit better, and then you'll be able to start in on creating something that is going to resemble a mask. I did this one kind of as a starting point for something that would conform to my face just a little bit more, and then I could add on to it, make it as big and elaborate as I dare to do so. So good luck and have fun.